Now, the time is almost 12 o'clock. We are 5 hours through a total of 6 hours. And I can now, I'm now proud to say we're halfway through the PowerPoint slides. Don't worry, don't panic. The look on your face. If you remember do you remember what we said yesterday about Albert Einstein's supposed quote, if you've got an hour to solve a problem? You remember that? What did he say? You're going to spend 55 minutes looking at the problem and 5 minutes looking for solutions. So the main thing is, if you know the problem very well, the solution will become far more obvious, right? And we've already kind of been talking about solutions up until this point. So that's my excuse for only being halfway through now. Okay, so why do we have then that sort of personality type or temperament, charita? Why is it useful? So we just talked about how this was originally sort of introduced for the prospective practitioner in the context of maybe like a novice monk or a novice nun. They want to engage in their practice, so they go and find a teacher. The teacher observes their behavior and then wants to decide on what's a suitable practice for this particular temperament type. So once we know our personality type, we can choose. Well, you know, I say here we can choose. Really, ideally, you want to practice with a good teacher, right? Because even ourselves trying to assess our own mental state, yeah, we can do it okay. I mean, we are the only people that can directly see what mental states we have, right? Other people can only infer what our mental states are based on what they see our external behavior. But that's not the whole picture. Be that as it may, an expert teacher is still very valuable because we can also trick ourselves. You know, because we have the sense of self and the sense of identity, we will have a lot of our own internal, unconscious resistance to being perfectly honest with ourselves, right? Who wants to go, I'm an angry type, I've got a horrible temper, I get angry at everything. Some people might be honest, some people won't, they don't want to admit it, all right? And if we don't want to admit it, it's going to be pretty tricky. But maybe other people outside be like, you know, I don't have an anger problem, and everyone else like, you are an anger problem, right? So that's why another person is very valuable, right? There are parts of ourselves that we see that other people see. There are parts of ourselves that we see and other people don't see. There's also parts of ourselves that we don't see, but other people do see. And then there's a whole bunch that none of us see. Okay, so the practice deals with a specific problem. And this is important to keep in mind. Most meditation practices in general are for specific problems. This is why the kind of the medical analogy is a very good analogy, right? We are ill just as our body gets sick with a particular type of illness. You need to take a particular type of medicine for treating that illness. So this also means that, you know, imagine you had a friend who had, I don't know, some kind of heart problem, heart disease, and they went to the doctor, and the doctor prescribed them with various types of medicine. They took the medicine and it made them feel a lot better. And then the friend goes to you and says, well, I went to the doctor, I was feeling terrible. I went to the doctor and they gave me this medicine. Medicine was great. I also recommend that you take the same medicine that I did. How would you feel about that? You'd be like, what are you talking about, right? I don't have a heart problem. Why would I take heart problem medication? If I don't have a heart problem and I start taking heart medication, I might also start to have a heart problem. Now that sounds, of course, that's pretty obvious. However, it's also pretty common that when it comes to specific spiritual meditation practices and cultivation practices, we don't do that at all. I went to some practice and I found that practice was very good for me and I liked it and I enjoyed it. So I tell all my friends that they should do it too. Even though my friends don't necessarily have the same problems that I do and they're not the same personality or temperament that I do. But it was good for me, so it's got to be good for everyone. Be careful of this. This is a very common problem. And this is when you see the sort of idea that, there's this one practice that will solve all your problems because it solved all my problems. Well, that's you. I'm not you. Everyone's got their own path to tread. You wouldn't take advice about what medicine to take from a random friend. You'd ask a doctor. Likewise, if you want meditation instruction, you are best to find a good teacher. And also, just even with finding doctors, I don't know how your medical system works in Singapore. Do you still have GPs? Do you still have like family GPs? Family GPs is very good because they don't just know you, they know your family and they know your whole situation. They're much more able to know what's going to work for you rather than just go to some random fancy clinic, like I've never met you before, 5-minute consultation, take this. Likewise, engagement with a good teacher who knows you well is going to be the far better way to find something that's appropriate and works for you, right? And they can also not just give you the medication, but see your progress as you go through this sort of course of treatment. So don't trust this guy flogging his random, you want to buy some medicine? Okay. So what are they? So the desirous type. There are a few different practices. Contemplations on impurity, dissatisfaction, impermanence. One of the old ones, specifically for monastics, was like contemplation on dead bodies. Fetishization of the human body and its attractive elements. We look at all the attractive parts, particularly towards human bodies that we are physically attracted to. We idealize these and we look at these. Remedies include reflecting on the body when it gets old, right? And our bodies are going to get old. When they're sick, when they're ill, all the other processes that we don't look at, right? Sometimes make the joke of, how often do people, how many of you, like when you go to a restaurant and get some food, take a photo of the food, post it on Facebook or something like that, right? You do that? So that's the before shot, before you eat. Do you do an after shot of what happens to the food after it's gone through your system and been digested? Do you post that on your Instagram? No, you do not, because that is disgusting. And that will probably get you banned. And people will think that you're very sick. But it's just the other side of it, right? So this is the desirous mind. You focus on the bits that give you pleasure, but there's the flip side of that. The human body isn't also beautiful and lovely and smells like perfume and things like that. It's sweaty and smelly and dirty and blah, 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 blah. Human body's impermanent, it will change. So depending on what kinds of things we're attracted to, so for example, if it's food, some basic things like when you're eating, be very aware of the practice of chewing your food and think of that lump of chewed up food in your mouth as it goes into your body. Yeah, it's not quite so yummy anymore, right? So instead of reflecting on the pleasant aspect, you're reflecting on the other aspect to kind of balance it out, take you in that other direction. And variations depending on what kind of objects we are overly desirous of. The second type, the aversion type, the angry type. So what kind of practices do we have here? Classic one, of course, is practices like loving kindness, compassion, and so forth. Pretty standard stuff here. The deluded type. Now this is traditionally they say reflect on dependent origination and non-self. It can be pretty abstract there actually. There are lots of different types of delusion, though, and different types of ignorance. So it also kind of depends on what kind of ignorance we're talking about here. And when we say ignorance in this sense as an affliction, it doesn't just mean that you don't know everything. There's infinite number of things that we could potentially know. Most of them are kind of irrelevant towards our own spiritual development. But in particular, delusion about like ourselves and who we are. And so this is why we have the right view. For the conceit type, what do we do with that? If we're overly conceited, very self-centered, thinking ourselves better than others, how do we deal with that? Any thoughts? So if we're thinking of ourselves as better than others, we need some kind of way to have some sense of like equality there. Here's me, here's you, just kind of equal, the same. I'm no better, I'm no worse. So one of the techniques for this was a kind of analysis of body and mind. So instead of like, oh, I'm so young and attractive and beautiful and handsome, and you are all beneath me because you're all blah, 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 you can analyze yourself and say, well, here I am, a human being. I have one head, 2 arms, 2 legs. I've got eyes, ears, nose, tongue. I've got a little bit of hair still on my head. And look at you all. You are also all human beings that have heads and arms and legs and eyes and probably more hair than me. What's the difference? Or we can break it down further. This body is just made up of matter, solid matter, liquid matter, just as your body is also made up of matter. So what am I so proud about? Right? I've got X number of kilos of human flesh, and you've got X number of kilos of human flesh. We're all kind of the same. That's the external kind of conceit. What about internal types of conceit? You can do similar things. I've got views and opinions about the world. Guess what? You do too, and so does everyone. I've got opinions, you've got opinions. I've got thoughts, you've got thoughts. I've got my beliefs, you've got your beliefs. What specific beliefs we have, I mean, that's just kind of a matter of conditioning. I'm just another conditioned being, conditioned by my upbringing and my da-da-da-da-da. And guess what? So is everyone else. So what exactly am I so proud about? Now, this is many of these, note, they're a shift of attention. Many of these practices aren't so much about, objective facts, because you can still say that maybe I am older than you or I am younger than you. Yeah, that might be true. But when we recognize that there's an affliction, the important thing is to deal with the affliction, right? The scattered type. How to deal with the scattered type. Now, I think if we were kind of, remember a lot of these kind of ideas came about from like a long, long time ago in very different cultures and societies to what we have now. I think our modern lifestyles, most of us are very heavily this. Just think, for example, back 2,000 years ago, probably most people do some kind of agriculture or maybe some kind of manual work. And so if you're like just some farmer or you make baskets or something, how much intellectual work do you have to do during the day? Not a lot. I'm going to plow this field. And here I am behind my oxen plowing the field. Plow, 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 get to the other end, turn around, plow, 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 plow. Occasionally check the weather. Make sure the cow's okay. It's pretty chill. Okay, fast forward 2,000 years to how many of you work in offices? How many of you spent at least half your day in front of a computer screen? Massive data, just absolute huge amounts of data, and all that kind of data here is numbers and words and concepts and things and schedules. Now, these are all thoughts, and so at any given time you've got like 20 projects that you just personally are working on, right? And that I've got to deal with this and this and this, and I've got to do the accounts for this one and this one and this one, and then I've got to do these meetings. And this is just absolute, this would come into the category of scattered type. Just absolutely too much going on in our heads compared to the first century farmer out there in his field, Looks like it might rain. Plow, plow, plow. And the other difference is they're very much involved with the body. A lot of this body work. And so when the mind, when your body work, you're very centered right here, right now, in the present, doing these things. Whereas in front of the computer screen, well, yeah, you're sitting in that chair, but you none of your attention's on this, right? It's all in this other stuff. So blood flow pumping up to the brain, massive. So practices like awareness of the body, the breath, focusing on being in the present. So I think that these practices in particular, particularly for modern people, super important, just to kind of bring our physical and mental state back to a bit of an equilibrium before then we can reflect on maybe other elements that are going on and we have to deal with. And of course the next type, whatever particular practice is going to, any of them are going to work. Now, as we said, these are just some basic types. There are also many other types as well. Some other later systems in particular tended to swap out this one for what we might call the faith type personality. And another very old Buddhist temperamental personality distinction was between two main types. One was what's called the faith follower, so 随信型, the Shlad Anusari, the person who follows their Buddhist practice through faith. So the Buddha, what the Buddha said, yeah, I believe it. I have faith in that. What the monastics say, I believe it. The teacher gets up there and says, I think, you should do this and this and this. And they go, yes, Shifu. And they go and do it. And they don't spend too much time. Is that true? Should I really be doing that? Don't worry about that. The person who knows what they're talking about said to do it. Let's go do it. And then there's the other minority group who are known as the followers by Dharma. So the Sui Faxing, the Dharma Nusari, is more than an intellectual type. They don't just do it because some authority figure said to do it. They want to understand it. I want to make sure I'm only going to do it if I understand it. So I'm going to ask lots of questions. More of an intellectual type. So I think there might be a bit more of a shift in this also, maybe in our contemporary society. So anyway, so in a lot of systems, they don't use this category. They use the faithful temperament. And then certain practices are more faith-based practices, devotional type practices, for example. So far, so good? Are you noting which type you are and which maybe? So there we go. Who is this then? Oh, but they're so loving and kind. No, this is the angry person. This is what they need to do. Now, you have to be a bit careful here too, because the angry person probably is the last person that wants to do this. This is another reason why choosing your own practice can be a bit problematic. The angry person is probably the last person to want to do that. Just as the greedy type person is the last person that wants to reflect on the not so pleasant side of things. So many of these are antidotes. Just like the person that eats the very high sugar, high fat diet that makes them unhealthy is the last person to want to stop eating donuts. So, and in some of the texts, it's also funny, they don't just talk about particular meditation practices, they give like a whole thing, so they'll be like, so the angry type, they should go and find a village that's like a very lovely, cute village where all the people in the village are very kind and very friendly and nice, and they should have like a little meditation hut that's all very pretty, flowers and why? Because these are like the they won't find much to stimulate their anger because everyone's nice to them. It's a very lovely place. Right? And that's going to help them then work on the loving kindness to overcome that. And you can think of the flip side. Remember, the desirous type who's going to meditate on dead bodies, where should they live? Yeah, they shouldn't meditate next to the bakery store. They should go, they go live out in the charnel grounds. They don't have a cemetery. They don't bury the bodies. The bodies are laid out on the ground. Most people would generate massive aversion for them. But it helps that person overly attached to the physical body to overcome that. Okay. Man, are we running out of time in a hurry? Oh, yeah, okay, let's go. Okay, so now we're going to go. We had 3 steps in, right? We had unseen underlying tendencies, we had active mental states, and we had what? Physical, verbal, externally manifested. So subconscious, conscious, external. And then we're going to reverse order it, right? And we said, do you remember why did we do it in the reverse order? Why don't we just get rid of those seeds of anger and aversion? Why don't we just deal with those? Do you remember why? I gave an analogy of weeding the garden, right? You can't just go in. If I say, like, dig up your most deep-seated fear and face it. It's deep-seated, man, for a reason. It's like not so obvious. If I try to hit into that, so many other things are in the way. Right? Pufferfish is going to pop out. So we need to do the reverse. Oh, and it's also a bit like if we say here, the meditation practice doesn't just start with, say, loving kindness and compassion. Also, where do you even go to do that practice? Your external environment is very important. And it's like, it's very popular to sort of say, and particularly in East Asian Buddhism, partly influenced by some lines by Confucius, the idea of like the sage in the world, right? It's better to be like a sage in the world than a sage out of the world, meaning in society. This is a very popular idea. But it's kind of interesting because like the Buddha never teaches that. Buddha says when you want to meditate, get away from the village and the city. Go somewhere quiet, right? You want to calm down your mind. You can be all tough guy, like, I'm so tough. I don't need to go into the forest to meditate. I'm going to meditate in the shopping mall. You can try that, but to be honest, you're probably not going to get very far. It might just be motivated by conceit. I don't need to do that. I'm an elite meditator. Now, a really good, an actual elite meditator could do that. But we're not elite meditators. Let's just be honest with ourselves. So where you go and do your practice is important. So that's why if you want to, do some good solid meditation practice, go to somewhere that's conducive to that. Whether it's a temple in the city is still better than out on the street, or somewhere more removed. Your physical environment is one of your first considerations. Just like here, our first step in the process deals with shila, so like precepts, our external behavior in the external world around us. Right? So it's a lot like, for example, if somebody was maybe an alcoholic and they were thinking, alcoholic, I'm going to admit it, I've got a problem, I need to, quit alcohol. So just, what's the plan? Don't drink any alcohol. So you make the plan, you make the decision, maybe it's your New Year's resolution, going to quit drinking. And then your buddies call you up and go, hey, we're off to the pub on Friday night, you want to come and join us? You might think, well, that's okay, I'll just go to the pub and I won't drink anything. Do you think this sounds like a good idea? That's probably not a very good idea, right? But I said I'm not going to drink anything. I said I won't drink anything. But what happens when you put yourself in that environment of the pub? What happens? You're in a physical environment, right? Sense organs, sense objects. What happens? They stimulate underlying habits. And so when you're sitting there, when you're sitting there in the rehabilitation center going, "Oh, quit drinking," and there's all these signs around you telling you of the evils of alcohol, it's going to destroy your liver and your brain, and everyone's encouraging you to do the right thing, and then you put yourself in the pub, what happened? It's going to stimulate that, right? So if we're trying to go in a certain direction, you can kind of try to be the tough guy or the tough girl and just do it on your own sheer determination, your sheer willpower. But just don't overestimate ourselves. Put ourselves in the best physical environment for that. I mean, another example would be like a bit like the what's it called, the 孟母三迁, right? So the Mengzi's mother moves 3 times, right? You know the story? So when Mengzi's a little kid and they live next to, I don't know, what, a butcher or something like that is the first place, and then the kid starts imitating like butchering animals, and the mother's like, not what I want for my child. We move somewhere else, and da-da-da-da-da, until, what was the last one? They moved next door to like a school or something, and then the little Mengzi, of course he's not called Mengzi when he's a kid, Xiao Meng. I don't know, 绰号. Okay. Sees the teacher and starts to imitate it. Classic example, right? You're putting yourselves in the external environment that's going to shape you. There's also a saying in Chinese Buddhism, how does it go? 宁可在大庙睡觉，不要在小庙办道. You'd be better off sleeping in a big temple than trying to practice in a small temple. Now, okay, it's a bit unfair against small temples, but the idea is, if you put yourself in these big monastic environments, have any of you been to some of the bigger temples maybe, where it's just like, it's like this whole huge area and there's monks and nuns everywhere and the whole environment. You don't need to actually do much effort, just chill and just go with the flow, and that whole environment is just going to carry you in your practice, right? Or you could try to do your meditation retreat at home, but you're constantly fighting like the phone calls and the kids and all that kind of stuff, right? So where you're putting yourself in your external environment is a big factor. Don't underestimate it. And it's that external environment, of course, in which we're engaging in our external behaviors, right? So the practice of morality deals with the treatment of external actions in environments. And so this idea of morality or ethics, shila, includes behaviors, habits, temperament, and virtue in a very broad sense. And in terms of action, we can talk about the proscription of negative actions and the prescription of positive actions. So proscription meaning things not to do, and prescription means things that you should do. Both of these come in the category of what we call normative ethics. Should, right? Should. Should is not the same as what actually is. And so just be very clear about, Buddhist ideas about how we should behave don't always match how Buddhists actually behave. And don't worry too much about how other Buddhists actually behave. That's their problem. Let's just focus on what we ourselves should or shouldn't do. And where do we put ourselves in that environment? There we go. Now this picture is kind of slightly famous, and I've heard all sorts of descriptions about where it comes from. What do you see here? What do you think this scene is about? What do you think this scene is about? We have one nonchalant black and white cat, and we have a whole range of German shepherds. Anyone know cats? Some of you have cats? Maybe? No? Not many? How do you think the cat's feeling right now? How do you think the cat's feeling? No, the cat is not scared. That tail is not a scared cat tail. That's a totally chilled cat tail. Yeah. That's a meh. And what are the dogs doing meanwhile? Their sense organs are entirely fixated on the cat. They're all looking at the cat. But they're not just standing there, they're sitting. So they're also not being aggressive. So one explanation is this is like, it's probably like internet mythology, that this is a training school for police dogs. And their last test, it's like the last test before you shasan, before you go down the mountain into the world to serve the people. The last test is to see if they'll react to the cat. I don't know, it's probably made up. Right, so it's a test. So where are you putting yourselves? But they're showing discipline. They're disciplined dogs. It's not because they're asleep. They're aware of the cat. They know the cat's there. But they're not reacting to the cat, as we might expect. Okay. Run, little kitty, run. No, the cat's not running. The cat is totally chilled. And the cat's not afraid. Okay, so when it comes to then self-discipline, like we said, we start from our external actions first. And so one of the reasons why we start working on, if we want to ultimately deal with the deep inner states, but one of the reasons why we start with the external states, or external actions, and our environment is simply not that, one is that it's hard to just go straight into these deep states of mind. It's very hard to. But also do you remember our diagram with the process? What happens at the end? Feedback loop, right? So if you've got the feedback loop going, if you're wherever you are, if you're engaging in negative or harmful, say violent actions, you're creating a feedback loop that's going to create more stimulus to stimulate these same reactions from you. The classic example is when two people get into a fight and it starts to escalate, right? So it goes from like and then each step is feeding back into it, creating a reaction in the other person that stimulates even stronger negative reactions, right? So if we're mature, of course, we don't escalate it. The other person starts to escalate and we like chill down, don't bite, don't react. Maybe we can calm it down, hopefully, right? So as long as we're engaging in negative external behavior, we are creating an environment which is going to further provoke even more stronger negative behavior from us, and we're just going in the wrong direction, right? So this is partly the environment, but also partly our physical actions within that environment. Yeah? One of the reasons why, for example, for most meditation retreats, silence, right? Trying to calm down the mind. If you want to calm the mind, don't start talking. And if you had experience doing like your retreat, maybe working for a few hour sessions, half a day or even a couple of days, you're really starting to really settle and calm the mind. All those distracting thoughts, calming right down. And then somebody comes up and starts talking to you. Oh, just walk away. Just walk away. Or I like to have the little silence badge. Right? Because once you start talking, boom, all these other things will start popping up in your mind. Just spent hours calming myself down, and now you've just you've poked the bear, right? You've poked the bear, and now it's active again. So morality in the narrow sense is training in precepts. We've already mentioned the proscriptive and the prescriptive. That's normative ethics, things we should do and shouldn't do. And for most Buddhists, we've got all these systems. So the 5 precepts, the 8 fasting day precepts, that's our Bhagwan Zaijie, which are taken for 24 hours, several times a month. We have novice ordination, we have full ordination precepts, etc., etc. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these. Our main focus today is on the psychology, but basically, all of these things like I said, just restrain our external behavior so we're not putting that negative stuff into our environment that's just going to further stimulate these negative responses from us. right? And you see it even more so once you start to get into the fasting day precepts and the monastic precepts. One of the biggest differences between 5 precepts for the laity, and these are also for lay people, right? The Bhagwan there, but they're modeled on monastic lifestyle. Does anyone know the big differences there? What do you add to the 5 precepts to get to the 8? Okay, not eating afternoon. So reducing food intake. There's a few reasons for that, but one of them is simply, we don't want to overly stimulate the mind. Food is massive stimulation because it hits, we see it, we smell it, we taste it, and we touch it. So it's very stimulating. The only thing that is more stimulating to the mind than food is sex. Because it's seeing it, smelling it, tasting, touching, feeling it. Okay. So these are very strong things if they hit you with more stimulation. So one is not eating afternoon. What else? No comfortable bed. Yeah. You're not hitting on the key ones though, you're right, but... So basically refraining from entertainment. So in modern terms it would be, welcome to the 8-day retreat. Phones in the bag. Bag tied up, bag not thrown in the river, bag put away, locked room. Hope you've turned your phone off so that the room isn't like ringing phones for the next 24 hours. No music, no movies. Why? Because Buddhists don't like fun. No, that's not because Buddhists don't like fun. Why? Why do we stop the movies and the music? Because they just stimulate the mind. It's just excessive sensory stimulation. Most of it. Now, I would kind of add something. I think, this is my hot take, you can agree or disagree. To me, I wouldn't rule out, if you were listening to a pre-recorded Dharma talk, that wouldn't count, right? I'm talking about music and entertainment and stuff that's for sensual enjoyment, right? It's for the pleasure of it. That's the problem. It doesn't mean that just anything on a computer screen is not quite like that, right? But in the old days, how would they do this? The people in the village would finish the day. Okay, it's a full moon day or a new moon day. So they finish for the day, pack everything away, go up into the forest or the mountains to the monastery. And in the evening, they maybe have like one candle. It's in the dark, so you can't really see much. Hopefully it's a full moon, you can kind of see. New moon, not so much. Very dark, so less stimulation. Sit, close your eyes, and just listen to the talk. Now you're already shutting down so many of your other distractions, right? So even us doing the modern way we do it, we're in the shrine and very bright and illuminated. Of course, though, what's illuminated are objects of worship. So yes, you see the Buddha statue, you see the monastics. It is a type of stimulation, but it's not sensory gratification. You're going to see these things which are actually going to evoke faith, respect, devotion, and these are positive emotions that actually help to drive our practice, right? So reducing sensory stimulation for sheer gratification. That's the key point. And that's the big difference. And then, the rest of the full ordination, they're just fine-tuning various forms of behavior that basically just, they help monastics to be aware of what they're doing physically constantly, all the time, right? So if you've done things like short-term monastic retreats and you've got your robes and everything, right? Just walking, going upstairs and down, you have to be very careful what you're doing, right? Trip over your robes. Brings us into the present, focused right now. Don't know where this is. I did know, and now I've forgotten already. So this is it. You can see people have here, your tolfa. So this is a lay precept retreat. Okay, still talking about this now in the Eightfold Path. This self-discipline, morality or ethics, we've got 3 categories. We've got right speech, right action and right livelihood, primarily refraining from lying. And it's not just, the main one is what we would nowadays technically call bearing false witness, or you could, if you're American, you'd say perjury. The classic example for false speech is in a situation where someone is called up to be like a witness to something. Did you see what happened? And they did not see what happened, and they go, I saw it all. Right? I saw it all. Or they saw it and they said, I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything. That is the big one for false speech. It's not just that. Other situations whereby we distort the truth or omit the truth, etc., are other versions, but these are not just lie or not lie. There are also degrees involved and motivations behind our actions. And we also have refraining from abusive speech, divisive speech, and frivolous speech. And you can see there's abusive speech creates anger and aversion. And like I said, if we're doing that to other people are going to abuse us back, stimulates anger and aversion. And we're not cultivating anymore. We're going backwards. Likewise, to be divisive, frivolous, just talking about stuff that makes our mind full of a bunch of garbage is also not conducive to the path. Okay, but these come in degrees. Deal with the biggest problem first. Don't sweat the small stuff first, right? If it's too much to do everything. And then we have right action, and this is the end. So this is the verbal, this is the physical. Refraining from violence or harm is the primary idea. Taking life, or you can just say violence in general, harm in general. Sexual misconduct, taking what is not given. Did any of you do some of you I know did, last time I came we did like Buddhist ethics, right? So we talked about all this kind of stuff. Now we're just going through super fast because we don't have time and it's not our focus. And right livelihood, this is like our profession or what we do. So why is that a separate category? Well, likewise, if we're talking about what environment that we're in, our jobs, we're in our job. We're at home more than we're in our job, but most of our time at home we're asleep. So in terms of our conscious awake life, we're probably in our job place more than we are at home. So what is there in that job place is going to have a massive effect on us, the people around us, the things that we do. Choosing a profession that's conducive towards the Dharma, it's a big question. It's good to start Dharma practice when you're younger, so you can turn your life, education, and career in that direction, but it's never too late to change, right? So certain environments, good, being a nurse, where your job is to look after people's health. Great, right? That's really conducive to practice. Being a butcher, not so much, right? And so there's different categories. Don't be involved in selling drugs or poison or trafficking human beings. Pretty obvious stuff, right? Pretty obvious stuff. Okay, so that's the external. We then move into the dealing with the active mental states. So we've put ourselves in an environment and we're creating an environment around us that at least is not overly stimulating negative states of mind. But the thing is, we still have some already going on. We're not making it worse, but we still have to deal with these states of mind that we have now. For this, we have meditation. Deals with stage 2, treatment of active mental afflictions. The basic definition of meditation is single-pointedness of mind. Fixed without distraction on a single object. And so when the mind is constantly flipping from object to object to object, it gets very there's just so much stuff going on. There's just so much stuff going on, and it's hard to be clear about what's happening internally for ourselves, right? You kind of see it, but then it's stimulated by something else and some other thought and da-da-da-da-da. But if we can focus the mind on a single object, and we should say, it should be like a wholesome or a neutral object. See, what if I'm wholeheartedly focused on killing people? No, that would be wrong meditation, not right meditation. Okay, but it can be a neutral object as well. And when we fix the mind on a single object, the distractions die down, and once you're kind of on one level, then when the mind does become active, it's really easy to see it. And we can be very clear about what's going on in the mind. So, and we can also, this is another definition of mind, equal upholding, blah, 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 never mind that. So this is the person who decides they, don't meditate by the train tracks. It looks very dangerous. But the idea being here that externally the world is very busy, but internally we're reaching a state of calm. Now, another, I don't know if this is on the next slide or not. Oh, okay. So I don't know if there was a pond in front of the Buddha and the Bodhi tree, but this idea of like a pond is a good example. So imagine you've got a pond, like a nice pond with some koi carp or something in it. And if the water is very disturbed, right, it's very windy, or the fish are thrashing around or something, what happens to the water? It becomes very murky, right? Muddy. And there could be all sorts of things in that water, but you can't see because the water's all churned up. And if the wind dies and you stop throwing rocks into the water, hopefully what will happen? The mud and the sediment will kind of settle down and the water will become clear, and then you can see the fish and the turtles and the seaweed, hopefully not the trash, in the water. There's probably, let's say there is some trash in the water, a plastic bottle and old lunchbox, but at least now you can see it, and so you know what's in there. And so likewise, if you engage in calming meditation, you just settle the mind on one thing. Let's say you use the breath, focusing on the breath. You're just going to breathe in and breathe out and do that again, repeat, 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 and you think, it's so boring. If you want excitement, go to a movie. It's so boring. Just keep at it. Repeat, repeat, repeat. And as the mind calms down, wow, you see what's going on. It's quite common for a lot of people when they first start meditation that, they're like, my mind used to be fine, and then I started meditating, and then my mind went very crazy. It's like, no, your mind was originally very crazy, but you just didn't know. You were so crazy, you didn't know you were crazy. But when you start meditating, you realize just how crazy the mind is, and just how scattered it is, and just, you call it the monkey mind, right? Just jumps from object to object to object. So don't be afraid if you think, I meditated, my mind is out of control. Okay, well, at least now you know that it's out of control. Keep at it and it will calm down. And you can see the fish and the turtles and the trash that's in the mind. So we go from a state of coarse distraction to find calm. In the Eightfold Path, we have two elements. One is right mindfulness, and this is more of a preliminary stage to deeper concentration. And then meditation itself, which has greater depth. And, the two different terms here, but in many ways it's just a matter of degree. Now, just be careful. A lot of modern usage of the word mindfulness is quite different from the technical way that Buddhists use it. And they use it in a way that goes not just what we might call meditation, but also into what we call insight or wisdom. Okay, but that's just basically taking the word mindfulness and expanding what it refers to. But at first, it's just setting the mind on certain objects and not letting it wander off. And after a while, the mind will stop wandering off and it will stay on the same object, but it will have greater depth and focus into that object. So, right, mindfulness, we have mindfulness of the body, and then sensations and mental states. And look at this order. This order follows the same process of from the external working in, right? To be aware of our own body is much simpler. And it's also simply to do it when you're active, right? So when you're moving, you're aware your arm goes out, your foot goes up, your foot goes down, being aware of what the body's doing. It includes breathing and the breath. That's pretty easy. Most people, even like little kids, you can say, put your hands up, and they know that they're putting their hand up and putting it down. And then the sensations, a little bit more subtle still. We have the last one is known as mindfulness of dharmas. This gets a bit more technical, but let's just say it's more and more subtle states. More and more subtle states. So it's also following this process, working from the external, coarse, easily observable world, body, breath as a more subtle action of the body, and then into what we call the mental or inner states of sensations, mental states, and dharmas. Let's look at our pond motif going on. What happened to our Buddha? We had a real Buddha, and now we've got a stone Buddha. What happened? I don't know there. Okay. So, and then right meditation, and we get the classic descriptions of what we call the four absorptions. So this is a chanting, right? Dhyana or jhana in Pali. You remove some hindrances, which are like mental states, desire and aversion. Now remember, this is just the active desire and active aversion. At this level, it's not getting rid of the deep, deep level yet. Agitation, dullness, lack of confidence means confidence in your practice. So if you're engaging in a certain practice and you're thinking like, this isn't going to work, or I can't meditate, this isn't going to work, yeah, then it probably won't work, right? It's not a scientific experiment whereby your beliefs are irrelevant to your experiment, because this kind of experiment, you're studying your mind itself. So faith or doubt are in the experiment, they're not external to the experiment, right? So that's why having a bit of faith is very helpful. And then, these become some slightly more subtle states of mind, some very pleasant sensations, single pointedness of mind, and it gets deeper and deeper. Hello. We don't need to go through these one by one, but you can see all of these are just different states of mind, and they become more and more subtle as they go. So at first, at least, you're applying your mind to that object that you're focusing on. After a while, you don't need to apply it. The mind is just right there on it. You also first have these sensations, and they're very pleasant. And for a lot of beginners, if you have these very pleasant experiences from meditation, sometimes you get very excited by it. Woo! It feels once you get excited by it, what happens? You're going to lose it because you get excited. So it takes a bit of experience to be able to have that very wonderful feeling of meditation, and also just be like, okay, I'm not going to move. I'm just going to leave it. Don't react to it. And they get down to more and more subtle levels until we get this single mind, perfectly clear, perfectly balanced, and we don't even have a blissful feeling anymore. You've gone beyond that. These are still sensations, and so what happens with pleasant sensations? What do we normally do? Remember? Desire, right? But guess what? Desire is one of our hindrances. So this is why, you go from this rough, distracted, regular day state of mind into a calmer and calmer state of mind. It starts to feel good, and then it's easier to get attached to that. So we need to be able to, you got to let that go too. And the more you can let go of those, we get more and more subtle, very clear, just clearly cognizing what is going on. And then you can really see what's happening without overlaying our own emotions on top of it. So maybe not the best example, because the water's a bit disturbed here. But now you can see the fish and the stones. And these are below the surface, right? These are these deep underlying seeds in the mind. That piece of trash that's in the water there that you couldn't see before because the water's all churned up. But that piece of trash has constantly been, I don't know, spitting out all sorts of nasty stuff into your water. Now you can see it, and now you can deal with it. And that brings us to our last phase. So, insight, wisdom, prajna. Stage 3, treating the deep subconscious tendencies and dormancies. Now, once we get to this level, there's so much written about this in Buddhist traditions and Buddhist thought, and different traditions go in all sorts of different directions and different theories, and I don't want to kind of go in that direction, even if we did have time. But just to sort of say, at this level, then we're really starting to uproot the real causes of the problem, right? Known as wisdom, insight, knowledge. There's lots of other terms. Now, do keep in mind that the real wisdom and insight is going to be based on that morality and that meditation. And so the flip side of that is that lack of morality implies lack of wisdom. Now, some people might disagree. I'm going to say in general, there are a number of different Buddhist traditions will have the idea of what we call crazy wisdom. This kind of teachers that have very high levels of insight and knowledge, and they might act in very unorthodox ways. I would very much agree, unorthodox, totally. But there's a difference between unorthodox and unethical. They're not quite the same thing. They're not the same thing, not even not quite. They're definitely not the same thing. So wisdom doesn't necessarily imply that they're going to be very traditional or orthodox or by the book. But if somebody's claiming wisdom and they're acting unethically, I'm going to say that is not wisdom. That could be, all sorts of things. Yeah, so just keep your eyes open for that. So, we're accessing the subconscious in deep meditation, and this does happen maybe in shorter meditation retreats, but in longer retreats, it's very common that people really dig deep down into who they are, and that can be quite an experience. It can be quite life-changing. There can be so much variation in what that is. One thing that's in general very common is the way we do a lot of retreats in, say, Taiwan, do the practice, maybe a 7-day retreat, and at the end maybe sharing. People have a sharing time. People crying, but it's not crying out of pain. It's often this cathartic sense, like these deep knots that we have that we didn't even know we had. Through this process, they are released to some degree. And this is absolutely, it's like this weight off your shoulders, right? This like, I've been expending so much energy tied into these things, and when it goes, it's like tears of joy, not like joy, but like, right? It's a pretty common thing you'll see. Once we get a bit of that depth of meditation and some insight, but also lots of things that come up, that we suppress, that we don't want to look at. It's in some ways a bit similar to people that have traumas that still on their conscious day-to-day life they don't really see those, but they might come up in your dreams, right? Because the dreams are just, a lot of that stuff is just stuff from these seeds in the mind, right? Just when you're sleeping and then pop, some nasty recurring experience or whatever. And so when we're in this meditation environment, sometimes this stuff comes up. And how do we deal with that, right? So we need right view. We need to be able to see these experiences as, impermanent, as not based around an actual substantial sense of self, to be able to see them clearly, but also to be able to let them go and not further resist them or cling to them, right? Because once we're re-traumatized, if we then resist it, remember that resistance itself is just actually strengthening those seeds, right? It's not being re-traumatized is a real thing. But when you're in that kind of state of mind, you have that potential where that comes up, but you can see it. You in some ways you relive it, but you don't relive it emotionally. You see it. Yep, that's what happened. It's like a movie playing in front of you, but you are watching it rather than one of the actors, shall we say. If you reenact that trauma or that pain, then you're just going to re-strengthen it. But now we can see it from back here, and yeah, that's what happened. And every time you can do that, you're then reconditioning that experience with a response of calmness and clarity. So you're not forgetting it. It's not that you're trying to forget it or wipe it away, but you're removing those negative charges that are associated with it. Another example would be trauma that we go through where we blame ourselves. And now we see it whereby we realize that thing happened not because of me, but because of all these different conditions, of which 99% of them were beyond my power, right? There's dependent origination, right? And so I'm reprogramming my experience of that, but without centering myself in it, blaming myself for it. And that can, again, draw out that emotional charge. So we're then effectively removing those dormant seeds of affliction. And there's the other side as well. So you might think, well, I don't want to go into meditation, I'm going to re-experience my pains and my traumas. Also have very amazing and very blissful and wonderful experiences. Very lovely, very wonderful. We might have visions. The Buddha comes down and pats you on the head. He goes, good boy, good girl. Woohoo! Feels so good. Be careful, remember. Don't cling to that. If you start to, come out of your retreat and well, in my retreat, the Buddha said I was an awesome meditator. Yeah, well, by saying that, guess what? You're no longer an awesome meditator because you're reprogramming that with conceit and self-centeredness. It happens. You have this experience, something happens. You might have some vision of something, who knows? But you also see it with clarity. You don't further charge it with clinging or craving or self-conceit. You can mark it off as progress, but without clinging to it. Right? So we get both of the sides of it as well. We have to deal with the negative stuff, but we're also developing the positive aspects as well. Now, back to the garden thing. We've literally just got a couple of minutes left. So we were talking about these seeds within the mind as like weeds, like bad plants, noxious, toxic plants. We can also consider, for example, wisdom, compassion, generosity, caring for others as maybe flowers that we want to plant in the garden, right? Now, when you're doing that in your garden, right, you can't necessarily remove all the weeds at once. But in addition to removing the weeds, what you also want to do is you also want to plant the flowers. Because the stronger the flowers will grow, they will shade out the weeds. Yeah? Or the reverse. If you let the weeds grow, the weeds will grow over your flowers. So there's also kind of like a balance between them as well. So remove the weeds, plant the flowers, repeat, 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 repeat. As you do this, gradually less weeds will show up. Because remember, every time a weed grows up, it's just going to plant more weed seeds. Right? But the same with your flowers too. Right? They both have one's got like a downward spiral and one's like an upward spiral. So keep feeding the good stuff. Keep starving the weeds, starving the bad stuff. And as things go on, we get some kind of lovely garden going on. Okay, this is our mind. Our mind is like a garden. Our mind is like a garden. And within that garden, there are a lot of seeds. There's a lot of potentials. They're all growing at the same time. Some grow fast, some grow slow. Some are dormant for a long time, some are very fast. We've got a lot of work to do. Find where the biggest problem is first, find the biggest toxic plant, remove that first. Plant some good seeds while you're doing it at the same time. And just keep on working it, right? Just go again and again and again. It takes time, but you can also turn your mind into a beautiful garden. And this is what we call, ultimately liberation, awakening, the end of mental afflictions, the unconditioned mind, the original nature of mind, the Buddha mind. There's lots of different words. Okay, they're all subtle differences. But note, all of these are basically states of mind. And so Buddhism in general, the vast majority is centered around a kind of a psychology. And I think that's about it. There we go. That's the last slide, I think. No, well, maybe this one. This is the last slide. No. Last slide never ends. Okay, it finally ends. Okay. Boom. Oh, the time is 1:02. Okay, we're 2 minutes over. Thank you. Now, before we all run away, do we need to do anything at the end? We don't need to do a photo again, do we? No?
Just question and answer.
Oh, we've kind of been doing Q&A all the way through. A little bit of time for Q&A because I have a flight at 3:45. So get your questions. Come on, quick. You can, it's okay, but we just don't have a huge amount of time. You can just look. What's my school account here? Oh no, not that on the internet. Try that. Oh, that's very bright. You're also polite. Now, after I said about the flight, now you're like, 不好意思问哦. Okay. You sure? No burning questions? Okay. I hope this was of some value and benefit for you all. It's great to be here in Singapore. Thank you very much to William and the ICB team. Thank you very much. And hope to see you again sometime in the future, depending on how the scheduling goes, basically. Okay, great.